The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
For those of you who've joined in early, the session is about to start in a few minutes. Make yourself comfortable. You can probably grab a cup of coffee and a notepad. We are going to have an interesting session today, and it is going to start in a few minutes. Meanwhile, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you for a quick little favor. This is more like the usual sound check that we do. If you can hear me good, make use of the chat window and let me know. If you can see my screen well and if you can hear me good, oh great, thank you so much guys, thanks for the confirmation. We're all set and we'll start in a few minutes. Hi all, a very good afternoon. Thank you for having taken the time to join me in today's session. This is Jay, product expert from the AD Solutions team here at ManageEngine. So first things first, before I get into today's session, for those of you who want to try out the product as we speak, all right, we've got the application hosted on cloud. In a while, I'm going to go ahead and share the link for that specific instance that we've hosted in the cloud. It's going to be demo.admanagerplus.com. Yes. Okay. Let me quickly go ahead and share that to you on the chat right now. So this is going to be the URL. Demo.admanagerplus.com is going to be the URL. All right. For accessing the cloud instance, mind me, there's one tip. When it comes to accessing the cloud instance, I'd want you to access it as the administrator to take effect of all of the application's capabilities. If you were to log in as the technician, you'd get the view of that of the technician and the management actions are going to be limited right here. So make sure that you log in as the administrator to demo.admanagerplus.com. So this is going to be the URL for the cloud. In case if you have any questions coming up, as usual, make use of the chat window. Let me know your questions. I'll try and take them right away. Maybe if I miss out one or two, do not worry. I'll have them answered towards the end of the session. All right. And as regards to the recording of this session, if you want a recording or a copy of this session or the ones from the previous week, all you'll have to do is just drop a message to me on the chat with your email ID and I can have that email to you as well. So the recording is done. The questions are all up. We are open for questions, and yes, the cloud instance is also set up. So we are all set, and let's get into today's workshop. Yes, so this is going to be the 4th week of the 5-week workshop series we are organizing for ADManager Plus. Let's start off with a quick recap as to what we saw in the first 3 weeks. The first week was about the first phase of a user's life cycle, which is user provisioning. When it came to user provisioning, in the first week, we were discussing as to how to make use of the application to get users onboarded, and that too, we got the whole process of onboarding simplified because we created smart templates and made use of CSV. We went on to see how to have users bulk created or have users created into multiple departments using user creation templates. Yes, that was the agenda of the first week. Week 2 was about the second phase of a user's life cycle. And what is that? We went on and discussed about user management. So we were talking about two things. One was efficient user modification, and number two was deprovisioning. So that was efficient management of AD users. The second half of second week's session was about Office 365 management and Exchange mailbox management. We also saw that all of this can be done from one console, which is ADManager Plus. Yes, so this was the agenda for week 2. Week 1 and week 2 was all about AD user accounts, the first phase, the second phase, and the third phase: creation, modification, and deprovisioning. So that was the agenda for the first 2 weeks. Last week was about Active Directory reporting. When it came to AD reporting, we went on to discuss 10 use cases with 10 different reports, AD reports that came pre-packaged with the application. Yes, and we also saw and discussed something critical. We were talking about file server permission management. So we saw how to have reports generated for shares in folders and NTFS permissions, and then we went on to carry out file server permission management. Yes, so what's going to be today's topic? Week 4 is going to be about Active Directory delegation and workflow in your AD. Yes, so when it comes to Active Directory delegation, what are we going to discuss today? We are going to start off with restricting the delegation, or having an attribute level restriction when it comes to a specific technician being designated with a role. So the biggest challenge that we'll be tackling today when it comes to your native, the problem is you can't keep track of what delegation or what role is assigned to which user or which technician. That's a big challenge. And number two, having it securely done. Now that you have now that it's difficult to keep track, if a user in the course of operation is given access to a critical group, so that's going to be a security risk that we are about to face. So it's important to not just delegate, but also it's important to have restrictions when you actually go ahead and get the delegation done. Yes, so we are going to talk about enforcing attribute level restrictions. That's the first task we'll be talking about. We'll go ahead and talk about HR executives and having a specific role being delegated to the HR executive. And what's that going to be? From the product, yes, we are going to create a user management console. Yes, we are going to create a user management console, and all that your HR executive has to do is to fill out a simple web form for user onboarding. So it's not going to require your HR executive to key in complicated details for your end user. It's going to be pretty simple, straightforward. All that he's got to do is fill out a form, because we've delegated a role that gives him access to this user management console. Yes, that's the second topic that we'll be discussing. Okay, we'll go further and talk about another restriction, a critical restriction, which is going to be and restriction that's specific to your organization unit. Okay, say you have your organization that's spread across the world with branches in different countries. At that point in time, you would want an administrator of a particular geography to have the capability to only manage those users belonging to his geography. If that's the case, yes, we will see how to enforce an restriction for OU. So a specific OU is going to get accessed by only a single technician to who you give access. Yes, so that's as regards to delegation. So the first three topics: enforcing attribute level restrictions, creating a user management console for your HR, and creating an system of delegation where it's OU based. Yes, so that's going to be the tasks for delegation. The second half of today's session is going to be about workflow. Okay, workflow is a simple ticket system. So what's going to happen is a request review approval mechanism is going to be incorporated. A technician will be given access not to directly perform a task, but instead he'll get to raise a request for a task. And then there's going to be a reviewer who's going to review it, an approver who's going to approve it, and finally an executor who's going to execute it. So that's going to be the workflow. All right. And when it comes to workflow, we are going to talk about auto assigning these tickets. So we've got a feature called as assigning rules that is going to help you automatically assign a specific ticket to a specific technician. So we'll rightly assign tickets and also track progress. Yes, so this is going to be about workflow. Alright, so today's session is going to cover two important topics. Number one, delegation, and number two, workflow. Let me quickly get into the product and start off today's session. Okay, like I told you already, this is the cloud instance that you can make use of to access the product. Switching to my console. Yes. So we are welcomed by the dashboard view. Like you know, the dashboard view gives you a quick overview as to what's what. It gives you details such as user reports, system reports, and a lot of other reports as well. So it's not just data that's here. You can actually perform a management action by clicking on a relevant tab. Yes. So that's the home tab for you. The first 3 weeks we were discussing about AD management and AD reporting, user creation and modification from AD management, and user reporting from AD reports right here. Alright, so what's going to be the tab that we'll be accessing today? It's going to be two tabs, one AD delegation and number two workflow. Let me quickly start off with AD delegation. So why are we intending to delegate? You as the administrator would want to ensure that you rightly assign tasks to a user. You also want to ensure that you don't over assign or give a user more power than what he actually requires. So that's going to be the AD delegation challenge that we are going to be solving. When it comes to your native, like I told you, the biggest disadvantage or the difficulty is once a delegation is done, it's going to be difficult to keep tab of who's been given what access. You do not have a log or a history to see who's given what access. So that way, if in case you forget to revoke an access that was given, that's going to be a critical problem. For that, what we can do is have the whole delegation module done through the application right here by creating help desk roles. So the first task is going to involve us creating a help desk role. When it comes to delegation, there are only two things, simple two steps. The first step will require you to create a role. So this is where you will define what are the set of actions that a specific role has the capability to perform. So the role, say for example, like the ones that are listed right here. These are the predefined roles that come along with the application. Roles for modifying computers, roles for moving users, roles for resetting passwords. So this specific role gives the user the permission to reset password for AD users using ADManager Plus. So what does this mean? So we've created a role for a specific management action which is resetting password. So likewise, you can have multiple tasks that can be performed through a specific role. You create a role first. That's the first step. And like I told you, it's a two-step process. And the second step is going to be for you to assign the role that's created to a technician in your organization. Pretty simply, you can add a new technician and have that role that was created assigned to that specific technician. All right, so let me start off by creating a help desk role. Okay, so how do you create a new role? Click on create new role. So it's going to be AD delegation, help desk roles, and creating a new role. So we are creating a role for help desk. All right. So this user is going to have, or this technician is going to have the permissions to create a user, to modify a user. All right. From the layout here, it's pretty evident that a help desk role can have access to three of these modules. One is AD management module. The next one is the AD reporting module. And the third one is the administration. So administration is the module from where you get to decide what's going to be the layout for the technician or for the role. Yes? So let's start off with AD management. So I'm creating a role for the help desk and I'm going to go ahead and grant few permissions or grant this role or assign few tasks to this specific role. So I'm starting off with AD management. Like you can see, these are the management actions for which access can be granted to. We've got user management, we've got computer management, we've got something as critical as group management, security, OU, file server, and not just AD management that's covered right here. We've also got Office 365 management. So the starting is going to be pretty simple. We are going to create a role for help desk and give him the permission, him or her the permission to create and modify users. So it's going to be create users, all right, and then modify users. So what I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to give this user complete access. When it comes to user creation, I'm letting this specific help desk technician to have access to creation of users both in single and in bulk. When it comes to modification, what I'm doing is I'm just letting this role have access to single modification, and just to double check that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to deny bulk modification. So this is going to stop my technician, or it's not going to give my technician any access for a bulk modification task. I'm creating a role that's letting him or her, yes, create users and modify a single user. The first step of selecting the management action is done. The next step is to specify those attributes that this user can modify. So now that I've said modification, I have to go ahead and grant access to certain management tasks. What are they? So I'm going to let this user or this role have the ability to reset passwords, the ability to unlock user accounts, and the ability to delete users. So I'm giving him access to critical things like resetting, unlocking, and deleting. So ideally, your help desk technician is going to get access to all the three basic tasks: deletion, unlocking, and reset password. What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and keep this help desk role as simple as possible for the sake of the workshop. You can feel free and add more roles if your situation demands. Yes, that's as regards to user management. Likewise, you can get into computer management, add few more. You can get into group management, say grant access to this help desk technician to create a group, to modify a group. Likewise, you can go one tab after the other and grant access to certain management tasks to this specific role. Yes? Alright, so that's as regards to the AD management module. The second module is going to be AD reports. So now that I've granted access for my technician to disable accounts, to delete accounts, to reset password and unlock those three basic fundamental management actions, it's logical for me to let my help desk also have the provision to generate reports for the account status, which is going to be to see who are the logged out users so that he can unlock those users or reset passwords for them. Yes, so I'm giving access to this specific report alone. Alright, when it comes to administration, I'm going to leave it just like that. Just the basic of it. I'm not going to customize any of it. So you can choose to alter any of it to give him access to the AD Explorer right here. He'll get access, he or she will get access when this is enabled. Likewise, the domain settings. But it's advisable to not to give access to these critical things because it's just a role for a help desk. Yes? Okay. So all of the modules are right here. You can scroll through one after the other and check the ones for which you want your help desk technician to have access to. Alright, so since this is just a plain simple help desk role, no administration. It's just going to be a report and few management actions. management actions involving user management for creation and modification in single with permissions to reset password, unlock users and delete users. Alright? Alright, so I've kept the role as simple as possible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly hit save. The first task is done. I've successfully created a help desk role for the help desk. Yes. The next task, the second step of the action, is going to require me to assign the role that I've created to a technician. This is where I figure out the technician and map the role that I created to that specific technician. So how do I do that? These are the basic help desk technician roles that come pre-packaged with the product. One is the administrator role, another is the HR associate role. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new role for my user. And how do I do that? Click on create. Simple. Let me show that once more for you. AD delegation. Once you're done with help desk role creation, you get into help desk technicians right here and hit on add new technician. You add a new technician. So this is where you select the technician for who you want to assign the role. Selecting the technician. So I'm going to look up for my help desk technician, help desk, searching in progress, and I have my help desk there. This is my help desk technician. Yes, the next task is to assign the role that I created. And what was that role? The role was for the help desk. So here I go, selecting role for help desk. I'm almost done with my operation. I've selected the required technician. I've also mapped the role. The next thing that I'll have to do is go ahead and hit save. So what do we have right here? We have successfully created the help desk technician with a specific role, and that role is for help desk. Yes, with those permissions that I gave this user access to. So now I've logged in as the administrator. Yes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly switch to this specific technician, the help desk technician who was just granted a role for the help desk, and I'm going to show you as to how the whole layout gets changed. So now that I'm the administrator, I've got access to AD management, all of these modules right here under AD management. AD reporting, yes, the whole thing. Likewise, for automation, I have the whole module. I also have administrative privileges to perform all these tasks. That's because I'm the administrator. A while back, what I did was I created a help desk role and I mapped it to a help desk technician. So now I'm going to log in or pretend to be this help desk technician and show you how the layout gets altered. Help desk and logging in as the help desk. One quick moment, there seems to be an error with the credential that I entered. Okay, sorry about that. Let me quickly check for my help desk technician's credentials and get back and log in as the help desk technician. One quick moment, sorry about that. Searching for my help desk technician. Alright, so I have my help desk user right here. Okay. Let me quickly set his password right so that I can impersonate as the help desk technician and get into the module to show you as to how the layout is going to look. Signing out and logging in as the help desk technician. Help desk, okay, and then the password, hitting login, There seems to be a glitch. Let me quickly troubleshoot that for you. So let me again log in as the administrator to show you how it's going to look. We are trying to create a help desk role. We've created a help desk role. We've also assigned it to a technician. All right. The next thing I'll have to do is log in as the technician to see if it's working, but then there seems to be an authentication issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly select another user and create or assign the same role to that and try and log in to see if it's working fine. It's got to work fine. So I'm going to quickly look up for a user and assign the role to that specific user. Okay, I'm going to make Scarlett my help desk technician. Let me quickly check if Scarlett's account is live. So what we are trying to do is we've created a help desk role for the IT technician. We are looking up for a user, a right help desk technician, and the next thing that we'll have to do is to give permission to that user for a specific role. Oh, now I understand. The account must have been disabled, alright. So yes, updating the user. Let me quickly run you through once more as to show you how to have the delegation done. AD delegation, help desk role created for this specific task, creation and modification of users. The associated technician is going to be added right now. Yes. How do I do that? Help desk technicians, clicking on add new technician. All right. The next thing that I'll have to do is select my user. Okay. It's going to be Scarlett. Likewise, you can have your own help desk technician selected. Select that specific user and map a specific role that you create. In this case, the role for the help desk. Okay. Hit OK and hit save. Before I hit save, there are certain things that I'll want you to note. The first thing that you must have observed is this checkbox right here is enabled. Alright, and what's the checkbox for? It's for impersonation as the admin. Okay, this is a critical checkbox. The reason being, if a specific user, say for example Scarlett that we are discussing right here, does not have access to a task like creation of user accounts, okay, in your native Active Directory, this specific user, even after having tried to log in into ADManager Plus, if she tries to create a user, that's not going to be possible if this checkbox were not to be checked. So what I'm trying to say is, if a specific user does not have permission in the native to perform a management action, it's okay, it's perfectly okay. We can still grant that user securely to have permission to this. So what's going to be the upside of impersonation as the admin? So here comes the beauty of it. The moment you hit impersonate as admin, even though this specific user does not have access in native, right? When this user logs into ADManager Plus as the technician, she is going to get access to perform a management action, which is user creation, because the task is going to get executed through the administrator's privilege. So that's the beauty of it. When I was talking about having AD delegation made secure or securely creating roles and having them delegated, this was what I meant. So you impersonate the admin. Now that the admin is very aware that Scarlett's been given granted access to, there's going to be no problem at all. So I necessarily need not go ahead and grant multiple users permissions in my native Active Directory. Thereby, I'm incorporating a great level of security. If I were to go one technician after the other, grant them access to different management actions, that's going to be a thing that I'll have to keep track of, because things as critical as account deprovisioning, yes, So that's going to require me to grant access to an administrative role or an administrative group to this specific account in native AD if this was not available. So this action right here is going to solve my whole problem of making my insecure AD delegation or non-secure AD delegation to a completely secure AD delegation, and that's because the product is going to take all the weight. So impersonate as the admin and hit save. So what I've done is I've created a help desk role and I've mapped it to a technician. Yes. And I've also made sure that that specific role, irrespective of the fact that he or she has permission in the native, yes, is granted access to perform that management action of user creation or user deprovisioning because impersonation is enabled. Now, you might have a question. So how do I keep track of who's done what? I've got 10 technicians in my organization, all right? And I've granted different roles. Say for example, in this case, I granted Scarlett the role for creating users and modifying users. Yes. And I also checked impersonation. So what does it mean? Does it mean that in my native, every time when Scarlett performs an action of user creation, is it going to be my administrative account that's going to be logged? Yes, that's the case. So every time Scarlett performs, the logs are going to read as the administrator performing that action. But then that's a problem, right? That's a problem when it comes to your auditing, all right? For that, we've got again a solution. We've got you covered there as well. So what's our suggestion is to keep it this way. As a best practice, do not make any delegations or do not grant any permission to your users or technicians in your native Active Directory. Alright. Instead, come to the application and make sure that you rightly delegate the required set of permissions to specific technicians and also track them by something called as the audit reports. So this is the beauty of it. So we've got the audit reports that are going to give you a clear insight as to which technician performed what management action. So right here you can see that, okay, I'm scrolling down to show you something from the past. So the help desk UK technician performed the task of single user creation, all right, on this specific date, and it was a success. We also are able to not just see actions that were successful, we're also able to see an failed attempt. So this way, even though a specific user, a help desk technician, does not have access in native AD to perform a management action, is given access through impersonation from the scope of application, the AD manager, can be tracked for every single action and made accountable for the very same action. So that's the idea. Do not give them access in the native, thereby you have a secure AD environment. But then grant them or let them impersonate as the admin and also track them to perform a specific action. And there's more to audit reports. The best part about audit reports is you can have these reports scheduled. You can schedule it as per your convenience and have yourself notified when a specific management action is done or performed by a user, all right? There's more to it. When it comes to the history, all right, you can have your very own, say for example, you can set it to 3 months. You can set it to 3 months and hit generate. So that's going to give you the list of all the management actions performed by different technicians in your organization in the last 90 days, in the last 3 months, and schedule a report for it. Or also you can go technician specific. You can select a specific technician and just see what management actions that technician has performed. All right, so let me see an administrator right here again is a technician. So I'm clicking on that and hitting OK and hitting go to see what actions have been performed. So likewise I can choose my required technician, and see or track as to what management action a specific technician performs. So what we are doing is we are creating a very safe AD environment by not letting all technicians have access to critical tasks, but still letting them perform tasks because of impersonation. So what I did was, giving you a quick recap, we started off by creating a role for the help desk. giving that role access to creation and modification of users. Yes, we went on to assign that specific role to the technician. Yes, and we also saw how impersonation can come to use. Okay, we've got another use case right here. When it comes to delegating roles to help desk technician, I told you that it's going to be possible for having roles delegated based on OUs or having restrictions based on your organization unit. So let's take an example where we are having an organizational setup, yes, with multiple branches across the world. So I've got an OU, all right, for a specific geographic location. So let me quickly switch back to my product to show you that in action. My setting is like this. So like I can see, my OUs are split into different geographies, one for Australia, one for India, Japan, the United States, alright? So I've got different OUs for different geographical locations. Now, I have a specific technician belonging to the United States, and I want to make sure that this technician has access to just perform tasks to a specific OU. Here the employees from United States. Is that going to be possible? Yes, definitely that's going to be possible. So we are talking about AD delegation, alright? We are talking about enforcing an OU level restriction, okay? In this case, let's take the example of Scarlett. So Scarlett is a part of the US team, all right, and she is the help desk technician who is going to take care of just the employees from the United States, all right. So what we can do is get into Scarlett's account, and like the display that shows you the list of available domains right here, you can choose a specific OU right here. Click on add OU, alright, and scroll to the required OU, select it, hit OK, and hit save. So what are we doing right here? We've successfully updated Scarlett's power to handle just employees from the United States. So what we've done is we've tried and edited Scarlett's account. We've granted access to only those employees who belong to the US branch. All right, so that's how you have delegations restricted to a specific OU. That's one use case. The second use case, okay, now that I created or I put in place a OU level restriction, can I also let my role or my help desk technician have limited access when it comes to groups? Yes, that's again going to be possible. We first discussed about OU level restriction. The next thing that we're going to see is creating a role with group based restriction. How do you do that? Pretty simple. AD delegation, modify this required technician. We've got something called as visible groups. So this is the console, all right. The arrow right here is going to give you access to exclude groups for this specific technician. So we are talking about AD delegation. We are talking about a technician who is granted access to all the employees in the United States branch. That's because we had a OU restriction in place. Scarlett, editing it, US employees. Now I want to make sure that this technician has just access to the non-critical groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exclude few critical groups from this technician having access. So I'm going to add those groups for which I do not want this technician to have access. And what groups are they going to be? They are going to be top level administrator groups. So I don't want my technician to be messing around with the administrator groups. So I'm selecting all of those technicians, all of those groups, all right, and I'm putting them under the excluded groups. So this gives me the provision to restrict this technician doing any modification to all of the users under this group, though they are a part of the US employee workforce or US branch. All right, so the US OU, yes, impersonation is already selected. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. What have I done right now? What I've done is I've created a role for help desk. I've assigned that role to Scarlett. I've enforced an OU level restriction for the US employees OU. I've also gone ahead and removed off or restricted access to critical groups for this specific technician. So we are done with the first task for the day, with the first and most critical task, enforcing restrictions and creating a secure delegation platform for your entire Active Directory. Yes, we've also seen AD audit reports. Audit reports again are going to give you a tab on who's done what action, which technician has done what action, so that you can use this for your audit purposes. Now you must have a question. What about those actions that the administrator performs on a technician? Is that audited too? Yes. Say for example, if I want to elevate the permissions of a specific help desk technician. Alright, here Scarlett had a specific set of permissions. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and grant more permission to Scarlett. So will that be audited too? Yes, of course that's going to get audited. So like you can see, it says modified. The moment I added more permissions to this specific account that did not have any permissions at all, it read modified. So I created a user or a technician, I added them into the module, gave them certain permissions, and all of that gets logged. With the time, with the technician who's giving access to a specific user, yes, all of that is going to get logged. So the entire process, starting with having a secured delegation, is not going to stop right there. It's also going to extend to giving you the provision of auditing the changes that a specific technician performs. Okay, so we are done with a secured AD delegation. We are good to go creating delegation accounts. Yes, the second task is going to be workflow. Now that you've understood how delegation works, workflow is going to be more or less the same. Workflow, like I told you, is a request-based review approval system. So there's going to be a requester, all right? The requester is going to raise a request for a specific task. There's going to be a reviewer who reviews it, an approver who approves it, and finally an executor in the suite who's going to execute it, which in turn is going to reflect in your Active Directory. So what is the workflow in simple terms? We've got four different roles. We've got the requester raising a request. We've got the reviewer reviewing it, approver going ahead and authorizing the action, and finally the executor with the power to execute the task. Here mostly it's going to be an IT administrator who's going to execute it, all right, on behalf of the approver, who's going to be a manager, all right. Okay, so you can have this whole workflow configured as per your requirement. We can keep it as simple as just two roles. We've got a requester role and we've got an executor role. So this is going to be my, say in this example, my HR, for who I want to create a management console or I want to create a user creation form. So I'm going to keep it simple. I have an HR, I'm giving him access to a form, and him or her, the HR, can fill out a simple form which is going to get forwarded to my technician, who is the executor, who's going to check for the authenticity of the data, all right, and is going to proceed performing the execution so that it gets incorporated in the Active Directory. So that's business workflow for you. Let me quickly get into the demonstration. For this example, I'm just having two roles, a requester role and an executor role, and I'm going to hit save. So fundamentally, for both AD delegation and for workflow, we have two components. One is going to be a role, all right, and number two is going to be a technician to who the role is going to be assigned to. Quickly switching to AD delegation so that I can tell you. Yes, we created roles, we mapped them to AD technicians, help desk technicians. Likewise, here in workflow as well, we are going to create requester roles and have them mapped to requesters, starting off with creating a requester role. So these are a few requester roles that are already created, alright. So what I'm going to do is, for this example, I'm going to create a requester role that is going to give my HR executive access to a simple user creation form. HR executive requester role. All right, this is the requester role. So this role, requester role, is going to give my HR executive the provision to create users, something as simple as that. I'm not going to complicate it. All that the HR can do is raise a request for user creation. Okay, user creation is selected. So from this module, if you want to have more attributes selected, say for example, if this role was for your IT technician, if you wanted your technician to have access to more operations, things like the ability to raise request for reset password, for deletion of accounts, you can check the relevant checkboxes and hit save role. For this example, I'm creating a HR executive requester role. The role is going to have the permission to create users in AD. So only this checkbox is selected. Hitting save. First task done. First prerequisite done. I've got a HR executive requester role. What's the next step? The next step is to assign a specific technician to that specific role. Yes, so what I have right here is I have the ability to add a new requester, all right, or I can also choose to associate an existing help desk technician to this requester role. So I have two options. The moment I hit associate help desk technicians, I'm going to have a list of those technicians who are a part of my AD delegation module, the technicians that I added. So like you can see, I have Scarlett, I have the help desk technician. So I can either choose to have these people set as the requesters or have altogether a new set of users. So here, since it's going to be a role that I'm creating for the HR, it's going to be a new requester role. So requesters and adding a new requester. All right. So this is what will give me access to all the available users in the organization. So I'm going to browse for my required user. All right. So here it's going to be my HR. So quickly searching for my HR requester. Yes, I've got my HR requester in place. So I'm selecting my HR requester. Okay. And I'm going to hit OK. But then before that, do you observe something different? We've got not just the provision to grant access to requesters for just a specific user. We've also got the provision to do it for an entire group. We've also got the provision for an entire OU. Okay. So here, like you can see, say for example, if you want to grant access to every single employee from the HR department to have the ability to raise a request for user creation, all you'll have to do is come to OUs and pick HR and hit save. Okay, so here in my organization I just have one HR requester, so I'm going to go ahead and select the user HR requester. In your case, if you have multiple users for who you want to grant access in one go and they belong to a single OU, all those users in the HR, you can select the OU, or you can also do this. You can go ahead and select a specific group if you were to have a group. Okay, here for this example, I'm just selecting a HR requester, which is a single user. Selecting OK. The next thing that I'll have to do again is right after user selection is the role selection. Selecting the requester role, the role that I created, selecting the requester role, hitting OK. And the last step is going to be again the restriction. So in this case, I can again do a OU level restriction. Yes, if I want my HR to have access to raise requests for user creation for just a single OU. Okay, say let's take the example of India. If this HR is a part of the Indian workforce and he wants to raise requests for this specific OU, he can have access to just creating employees in this OU, hitting OK. So we've not just created a role or a form, we've gone ahead and also restricted the OU for which this requester can raise access to or can give a request, raise a request for. Yes? We'll go ahead. We are done with the basic task of selecting a requester role, mapping that specific requester role to a technician, and we've also selected the required OU. So we are almost done with the second task for workflow. Now you must be having questions. The question as to, now that we are giving the permission for a requester to raise a request, who's going to get the request and who's going to review the request? Yes. So that's the question we'll be answering now. Here, like you can see, we've got something called as the assigning rules. So we are talking about a ticket from a requester being assigned to a technician or the administrator so that they can grant access or choose to either approve it or reject it. Clicking on assigning rules. So here, when a user is created, alright, user creation, the action of user creation, I can select a new rule or make use of the available rule. For this example, in most of the scenarios, we'll have specific rules, our very own rules. So it's good to create a new rule. The rule is going to be HR request approval. Alright, so when a request or an action, okay, for user creation, creating users, so action for user creation comes up, alright, from a specific requester, alright, and the requester is going to be the HR requester. It's important that you make sure that the AND operation is selected. If it's OR, both for the action of user creation and if it's a request from the HR, that's going to be validated. In this case, it's going to be AND. For the action of user creation from the HR requester, what's got to happen is a specific technician, which is the administrator, has to be notified. And I can also choose the priority. If it's user creation, it's going to be high priority because I'll want my users to be created right away. So the request from the HR requester, alright, for the action of user creation is going to get forwarded to this specific technician who I've chosen, which is the administrator. I've hit OK, and it's going to be a high priority notification. I'm going to go ahead and save this rule. So now you must have a question. What if I have multiple hierarchy workflow? When in business workflow, if I were to have a reviewer in place, would it be different? So now the request from the HR executive has to get to the reviewer, and from the reviewer it's got to reach the executor. Is that going to be possible? Let's see. I'm saving the new workflow format. I'm going back to assigning rules to see a difference. I've got something new. Till a while back, I just had a request creation. Now I have an additional tab that says request reviewal. So likewise, very similar to that, I can add a new rule and have the request directly forwarded to a reviewer. Can I add one more level of hierarchy? Yes, I can. Editing the workflow and adding the approver as well. Saving that. Okay. Getting back to assigning rules to see if there's an additional level of assignment that's possible. Yes, that's going to be possible. So I can have an approver set separately. So this way, if I've configured it rightly, right after a request is created, it's going to go to a reviewer who I've assigned. Once the reviewer is done with reviewing the request, yes, it's going to get approved by a specific technician who's going to be my approver. In this case, I can select whichever approver or whichever rule that I want, and I can also prioritize the rule based on the task. So I'm done with assigning rules. What about notification rules? Alright, when it comes to notifications, the moment a request is raised, the right user has to be prompted with a message so that he can get to action right away. In this case, for a user creation access from the HR requester, the administrator has to get notified. So when the request is created, who's got to get notified? If the request is forwarded to a reviewer, which reviewer has to get notified with what message? So the administrator or the requester or the reviewer or the approver necessarily need not come to the requests tab that's right here. Workflow requests is going to give that administrator access to see all the tickets. As a workaround, as a best practice, it's important that you configure the notification rules so that they can have a custom message that's delivered to their inbox. You can have a subject line, you can have a message, and you can also notify them via email. So the moment a user or a technician raises a request for user creation, the administrator is going to get notified, or the reviewer is going to get notified to review it, is going to review it. The moment he finishes his review, the approver is going to get notified. Likewise, the chain is going to get forwarded till the entire process is completed. You must have a question. Does it apply only if the task is successful? No. Even if a request is rejected, you can have corresponding messages set. Say for example, there's a user deprovisioning or deletion request that a requester makes. Yes, that request is rejected by the administrator. So you can have a custom message saying that the request for user deprovisioning is rejected. So the moment the request is rejected, the technician who raised the request is going to receive a message of rejection. Yes. So all request is going to be the module from where you can view the requests that are created. So here we have an example of a request. Let me quickly show you as to how that works. So this is a request that got closed a while back. So it's the status will give you a clear symbol or clear picture as to whether it's executed or not executed. The status reads closed. What was this request for? The request was for user creation. So the HR requester that I had given permission to had raised a request, and that had come to this specific technician here. After having viewed the object details, right, the user was successfully created because the request was right and the approver approved of it. So this is pretty simple and straightforward. A workflow for you is going to be a requester raising a request, a reviewer reviewing it, an approver approving it, and finally an executor performing the action so that it gets incorporated like I showed you right here. For this user creation, since it got approved, since there are no requests that are pending and it got approved and executed, we have an user object called Sherlock Holmes created because of successful execution. And that fell into the hands of this administrator because of the assigning rules that was rightly configured. And notification is going to give that administrator an email alert asking for him to check the request and process it. So the entire end-to-end workflow is covered with not just roles but also effective assignments and notifications so that you are on top of your system and you have a very quick you have a system that has a quick response. Yes, an agile system. So that's the idea of workflow, with business workflow, with requesters having the request processes processed by the executors so that that gets in turn incorporated in Active Directory. So giving you a quick recap on what we saw today, we started off with AD delegation. We created a help desk role. All right, AD delegation, help desk role, a role for a specific technician, in this case help desk. You can choose always to edit the role, all right, and add more permissions to it. If you want a specific tab to be given permission to, you can elevate the permission. So that's how you edit a role once you've given access. Yes, so we were talking about creating roles. We were talking about creating roles. We created roles and we had them assigned to specific technicians. We did the mapping by adding a new technician. We had restrictions, and what were those restrictions for? Restrictions for the organization unit, all right, by setting a specific organization unit from the list that's available, and restrictions for the group visibility. Let me show you the example that I used today. We were talking about Scarlet, all right. We enforced two restrictions. One was for the organization unit, just employees from the US, and we also talked about excluding access to the specific critical administrator groups. And finally, we were also discussing about something crucial today, impersonation, that's going to give a user or a technician access to perform a task in Active Directory without having to actually give them the modification or do a modification in your native Active Directory. So this is going to be an application level restriction that we are enforcing, or access that we are giving. Yes. The next topic we were discussing today was workflow. Workflow was very similar in terms of the usability when it comes to creating a requester role and having that requester role mapped to a requester. We also saw that you can have the workflow edited as per your convenience with different levels of hierarchy. You can keep it simple if there are just two levels, a requester and an executor. forwarded the request, the executor executes it and has it incorporated in Active Directory. And this is facilitated by two things. One is the assigning rules that's going to help and make sure that the right ticket gets forwarded to the right technician. And finally, the notification rules that are going to give the user a message so that he can act right away. He or she can act right away on top of that request. All right. Okay, so we are done with a quick recap as well. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a heads up into the next week's agenda. The next week is going to be the last week for the workshop series. It's going to be a critical week. Yes, we are going to be talking about all those tasks that we had performed in the last 3 weeks. And what are we going to do is we are going to automate all those critical tasks that we did in the last 3 weeks. What are we talking about? We are talking about automating the whole user provisioning process. It's that simple, automating the whole process of user onboarding. All right, and we're not just going to stop right there. We are going to go ahead and also discuss about something that's very critical, which is automated AD cleanup. This has been a feature request that's helped out a lot of our users, cleaning up your entire Active Directory by setting rules that are going to make sure that your AD environment is sanitized. You have inactive accounts in your organization, do not worry at all. You can have the whole process of cleanup automated with a time of inactivity set. There you go. You have a clean AD environment. So two things: user creation, user deprovisioning, all of it automated. All right. We are also going to talk about something that's pretty exciting. What am I talking about? We are talking about mobile Active Directory management. So on the go ADManager Plus application that's going to let you do user creation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go do a screencast to give you a live demonstration of user creation from the ADManager Plus mobile application. And the best part is the application is also going to let you use user creation templates. The whole process of user onboarding is going to get simplified through the mobile app. We are also going to take a look at few more features from the application. Yes, reports. Yes, the application has it. And finally, we will also discuss, have a quick glimpse into what's the roadmap. Where is ADManager Plus headed? What are the new features that we are coming up with? Yes. So that's going to be the agenda for the next week. Next week is going to be a critical week because we are going to learn about automating critical AD tasks and also setting up the iOS and Android apps. Yes, that's going to be a wrap on today's session. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for having taken the time. You can feel free to make use of the chat window to ask your questions right now. I'm going to answer them all of it. Yes, and you can also ask questions to this specific email address. You can have your questions emailed to support@admanagerplus.com for any further queries. Yes, I'm available at the chat window right now to take all of your questions. Thank you so much once again. This is Jay, your presenter for the day. See you. Tada. Bye-bye. You all have a nice day. Bye-bye.